right, it's your brother Zion Lex. Sign up for our online academy, which is Learn Torah Hebrew Academy at patreon.com/Learn Torah. There are several classes that we offer. We offer a Biblical Hebrew 101 class for beginners. We have a Biblical Hebrew 102 class for people who are a little bit more advanced. We also have a weekly Torah class. We also have our Patriarchs of the Covenant course, our Matriarchs of the Covenant course, and a bi-weekly rabbinical course. All of these courses can be found on Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/Learn Torah. You guys are definitely in for it. It's a very invasive class. All of our classes are deeply invasive and very, very meticulous to the T when it comes to understanding the culture, the heritage, and the history of our ancient ancestors. So sign up for Biblical Hebrew at patreon.com/Learn Torah. I am your brother, Zion Lex.
All right. Shalom, family. I have a special one for you today, a very special one. The interview that I'm going to conduct today is with a brother that I've known for quite some time now, and we've actually, over the years, built an incredible bond. There are a lot of people that I know in the Israelite community. There are many more that I've spent decades around. But as we all know through experiences in life, sometimes there are people that you can spend shorter time around and have shorter awareness for, but the chemistry is great. So this is such a brother. I'm going to be introducing to you guys my brother, our Moreh Vaughn Parker of the Great Awakening of Orlando. Shalom to you, Moreh. How are you doing?
Shalom, shalom, Toda Rabba Aki. Man, thank you so much for the warm, heartfelt welcome. As you mentioned, we've been working together. We've known each other for a few years. And when we think about unity, when we think about brotherhood, I consider you a genuine brother. You're not one who's conceited. I've watched you over the years. You speak your mind, you don't hold back, you keep it honest. There's never a doubt in terms of where you are. And I truly appreciate that. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you for this opportunity.
Likewise, man. Likewise. I want to say to everybody that's watching, family, thumb up the video and share the live stream, because we're going to be in rare form in a couple of moments. We're going to have the opportunity to go in and share things on a level that I don't actually always have the opportunity to do so. And I'm with someone that has some very, very special skill sets. And he's going to be introducing all of those things to us in a couple of moments. So just getting some of my things out of the way. My apologies, everyone. And here we go. So the first thing I want to ask you is, can you explain for us, Moreh, where's your upbringing? Where did you grow up? Let's begin there.
Wow, thank you so much. So I was born and raised in Jamaica, precisely in the backwoods of Jamaica, in an area called Manchester. So it's one of the parishes in Jamaica. A little city called Kendall. Was raised by my grandparents and learned some important things during that time period, primarily to work hard. So my grandparents were farmers, and I learned the importance of working for yourself, first and foremost. I was raised in a very religious setting, and from a young age, I was very controversial because in Jamaica, we have different religious groups. And I was always curious as to why. Why do we have so many different groups claiming to hold to what they consider to be truth? But most of all, Mory ZX, I was intrigued by the Rastafarians.
All right.
So all of my people from Jamaica, bless up in yourself, big up in yourself. But the Rastafarians, they were very intriguing. They were the first to really introduce me to an alternate name than what I was raised with for the Creator.
That's right. That's right. That hits home for me because as you know, and as some of the people know, my father's a Rastafarian and has been so for many, many years. I can remember as young as 8 years old, one of my father's closest friends when I was a younger child is his friend Judah, that lived in Vanderveer, Brooklyn, Flatbush. And I used to always be like, that's an interesting name, Judah. At 8 years old, I don't know the Bible yet. My dad, had a lot of books on the bookshelf, but I wasn't checking for them yet. But what I did know at that time, and I had a strong sense of Afrocentric learning, history, and culture, my dad always gave us that. But as far as the real underpinnings of biblical ideology and conception, I had not yet been introduced to that by 8. So the very first time I ever heard the name Judah was my father's best friend, who himself was a Rastafarian. So yeah, in Jamaica first, and then throughout the Isles of the Caribbean, and now throughout the entire world, you have the Rastafarian movement, right? You have the 12 tribes movement among the Rastafarians. You have your Nyabingi, right? Your true believers, your Nyabingi Rasta. You will see their dreadlocks. Then you have your Bobo Rasta that always have their head wrapped up in a turban. That's like the priestly class among Rastafarians. So we definitely have that in common. But before we go any further, I do have a rather large Caribbean audience, namely Jamaica, Guyana, Trinidad, and elsewhere. So I want to ask you specifically about when you grew up in Jamaica. What primary school did you attend back home?
So I attended Kendall All Age. That was close to me. I went to Charlotte Kindergarten again, just a few blocks from my home. Then went to Kendall All Age, and just a little bit of story in terms of that educational piece. Even in kindergarten, I excelled when it comes to religious studies above my peers. That is something that intrigues me even till today. It's as if my path was already set for me. And while I struggled in other areas of study, Moreh ZX, all my teachers commended me on my religious learning.
That's excellent, brother. That's excellent. So forward up, what age do you begin to travel and make it eventually to the States and settle down?
So I came here when I was 18, and I came here to attend college. So in Jamaica, I wanted to go to Edna Manley School of the Visual Arts. So the high school I attended in Jamaica was Homewood High School. And just for my audience, I may vacillate between the standard English. I may throw in some patois in there because we have a diverse audience. So I went to Homewood, which was in Christiana. And for those who attended school with me, my major was art. So I have a natural gift, natural talent for art. And sometimes people see my work, the flyers that I do, the business cards I do, and they'll be taken back. They're like, how did you compose this? It's because of my natural talent of being an artist. So in Jamaica, when you go to school for art, you kind of transition to Edna Manley School for the visual art. My dad was like, it's too expensive to send you to school in Jamaica. Come to the United States and attend school. Unfortunately, I was disappointed when I came here because things change, and he's like, you're going to have to do it on your own. So when I came here, attended college for one night, and I'm like, I can't do this. This is not for me because of the difference in culture. It took me a while to adjust more to the American culture, the American educational system. But that's my story. When I came here to the United States, the purpose for which I came was to study, and I just decided to stay.
All right. Transitioning as a young man in the United States with a Jamaican background, what was your first thoughts as you begin to encounter various religious groups here in the United States that Black people find themselves in? And if you can, tell us what that was. I don't want to assume that your introduction to consciousness in America was the Israelite community. Maybe you had seen other communities. So just kind of take us there and give us what was your general impression of the first religious factions and groups within the United States among Black Americans that you encountered. And if you can, give us their names.
Sure, absolutely. So when I came here at the age of 18, I was in the process of an awakening already to a higher level of spirituality, a higher level of closeness to the Creator. So I was raised in a church called Kendall Missionary Church, which more so adhered to the doctrine similar to the Baptist organization. But I realized that there was something lacking with the movement, because we would bypass what is called a Pentecostal church, and we would see these people dancing and running around, and a part of it, we're like, okay, they're a little bit crazy. Something is definitely wrong with them. For you just to be able to spontaneously speak in tongues and run around the church, and then when the music stopped, everybody stopped. So there was, that question there. But I had an encounter at a camp meeting, and I kept chasing that experience where I felt this closeness to the Most High. I believe I had an encounter with the Most High, and I kept chasing that. So when I came to the United States, I told my dad, I said, I want to attend this church that I had started attending in Jamaica. He said, no way. I'm Pentecostal, and you're going to go to a Pentecostal church. So I'm like, okay, I have to acquiesce, because Morehs, and probably like most Caribbean parents, it's their way or the highway.
Or the highway. There's no middle ground.
There's no middle ground.
No, you must be mad if you think it's middle ground.
So, wanting to, please my dad, I attended the church, and lo and behold, again, I felt the move of what I would consider back then, the spirit, where you have this sense of humility, this sense of reverence as you begin to worship. So that was noticed by some of the members in the church, and they started asking me to do what is called like exhortation. And I realized that, I was able to do it very well, and I was elevated to being a minister. My pastor began to mentor me to teach. And as I'm being mentored to teach, I'm seeing things in the Bible that I'm having questions about, that I realize is not being practiced. For example, the Sabbath, the dietary laws. And I kept asking, my pastor these questions. He said, well, that's not for us. We're Gentiles. That's for the Jewish people. And that kind of quelled me for a little while. Then I began to see and notice that our ministry only closely associated with like-minded ministries. So other ministries who had the same doctrinal belief, same religious stance. And in very times, pastors would get in the pulpit and kind of preach against the church across the street in terms of them not having the right doctrine. So me having this curious mindset, I began to research, why is the doctrine different? Why does the Baptist have a different doctrine than the Methodist, than the Pentecostal? My mom was Jehovah's Witness. Their doctrine is different. I had a close friend who was a Seventh-day Adventist. Their doctrine is different. So my first exposure to what I would consider diversity was the difference in doctrines. But the major shift took place when I encountered the Muslim movement. So I started talking to a few brothers who are Muslims, and they're bringing up, a different paradigm in terms of the text that we hold sacred. Later on, I came in contact with some of the brothers from the conscious community, and that's when I started learning about Kemet. And what caught my attention when someone said to me, "What's up, King?" And I'm like, well, "What do you mean? What's up, King?" That's kind of strange to me. And then, this idea that, women are queen, we're gods and goddesses, and, the term grand rising. And, I saw them as, quote unquote, heretics. They're non-believers, they have strange doctrine. And I elevated in the Christian church, became an ordained minister, then an evangelist, then an assistant pastor. And I served, in the Christian church for approximately 17 years. But throughout my time, I had a lot of questions that could not be answered by the church organization. So most of the pastors were trained by other pastors who were trained by other pastors. And the questions that I would present to them, some of them, it was puzzling. They would dismiss it. But the thing that got me was when I was told that Gentiles don't have to do the same thing that, quote unquote, the Jewish people do. So this is why we don't do a lot of things that the Bible calls for.
Okay. So from what I gather, your entrance to consciousness here in America was the church, and which is a continuation of what you already had at home back in Jamaica. But then, as you forward more in your journey here in America, you're starting to get a little older. You encounter Muslim groups, and you learn about what that is. And then, as you described, you even run into heretical views from heretics. Question: at what stage, at what point in your journey now, are you becoming more aware and hearing more about the Hebrew Israelites?
So the first encounter I had with what is known as Hebrew Israelites was from Israel United in Christ, IUIC. So the church that I attended, a few of the members had left, and I ran into one brother, and he was telling me about black people that were the people of the Bible. I said, okay, they've done a number on you wherever you're going. They've done a number on you. That's some crazy stuff. And of course, he was telling me that we got to keep the laws, and being in the church and trained by pastors to rebut and refute teaching of works, because again, that's not for us. Remember, I'm being taught that that's not for us.
Right.
That's for the Jewish people, and all that is considered works, and we're saved by grace and grace alone, sola fide. So I'm listening to the brother, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. But at that time, the brothers within IUIC, they would still use words like God and Jesus. So you know that Jesus is black, and I'm like, here we go again. This is this crazy stuff, man. So I began to have dialogue with my pastor about it. And he said, yeah, the Bible talks about in the last days, many shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devil. And this is this new movement. So the Hebrew Israelite movement was kind of seen as a new movement. And one of the things that intrigued me the most was the fact that they considered themselves, again, based on the people that I was talking to, this is what they expressed to me. They consider themselves a Christian group.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, this is different. So now I'm being introduced to, quote unquote, a black ideology that has taken over a people group that adhere to this Christian belief. Because throughout Christianity, and this is no secret, most of the major church leaders are white. Blacks within the quote unquote Christian arena, they are treated differently. Some will admit it and some won't. For example, some black pastors cannot preach in certain white circles.
That's a fact.
So with that, I'm like, okay, is this a movement to really amp us up, kind of, get us to a place where we can, do something to say, hey, we're not a part of this white establishment, because for some people, Christianity is a white establishment, this white establishment called Christianity. So, I continued to encounter them until I say, you know what, I'm going to do some research. So the next time I have a conversation with them, I'm going to show that I can prove them wrong. And that's what rocked my world.
All right. All right. So, I mean, shout out to Nathaniel of IUIC. There are a lot of people that have, mixed views on his movement and maybe even on him personally. But I put respect on the fact that he has gathered thousands of black men and women towards our liberation. And I don't think that anybody's perfect. So I say shout out to the brothers in IUIC, and I'm glad that you had such an introduction, because they're in my opinion, albeit having faults themselves, they're one of the strongest movements within the community, like it or not, ideology or not. So I'm a person that I take a step back and I always ask questions when I'm introduced to different factions and different communities. Many years ago, when I was younger, coming up in the Israelite way of life in the early 90s, there weren't as many Israelite groups as we see today. There was literally one West, which we call the Harlem Brothers or the Uptown Brothers. And then there was us, the brothers in Brooklyn, New York, who were the Torah only Old Testament brothers. And then you had factions of both groups scattered around the country and offshoots outside of the US. But it was still very few. Tell us about your introduction to Dr. Howard, Dr. Kenneth Howard, and his wife, Dr. Tawana Howard of the Great Awakening Assembly. Please do share with us your introduction with them.
Absolutely, absolutely. So to pick back up before I jump right into meeting Dr. Howard and Moreh Tawana Howard. So as I began to study to prove the Hebrew Israelites wrong, I end up finding out that they were right in a lot of areas. At the time I was in college. So
but hold on, if you don't mind, because I want to be fair. Maybe you should check with Brother Garfield, a fellow Yardie, because he would feel like you didn't do enough research. I'm playing. Okay.
Yeah. So I could even speak to that dynamic because I've heard Garfield, and I'm cognizant that sometimes when you use names, people, they notice you and then they'll make a whole video about you. So
yes,
Garfield,
yes.
my brother, do. If you're gonna make one video, call me boss. Yeah. So in college, I learned the discipline of proper research, investigating sources, understanding the difference between minority source and majority source, understanding the principles of research. So I applied all of those. And as I began to go through and I'm finding all these academic sources that validate the fact that, quote unquote, the academics word used for Yahudim or Jews, that there are Ivrim of color, Hebrew people of color.
Yes, sir.
On the continent. And this was validated not just by scholars on the continent, but by Europeans, because for most people, they engage in what is called source superiority, where European sources are superior to African sources. But when you can find sources of people on the continent and Europeans who are writing about encountering these Torah observant melanated Hebrews who look just like the people in the land on the continent, you cannot distinguish when you look at phenotype. They look the same, but one group practice a religion that is not indigenous to that area. And then the question came up, well, were they converts? The oral traditions say that no, we're not converts. This was passed down to us from generation to generation, and we can trace our migration pattern back to the land. And then they have some group who assert that they never entered the land. They migrated into the interior of Africa.
Right.
So looking at all these sources, I'm like, by golly. So I began to do a drill down on tribes, and I noticed that the tribe that my people are from, so born and raised in Jamaica, my grandparents told me that we are connected to the Maroon people. So big up all the Maroons from Okompo.
Respect to Queen Nanny.
Yes, my brother. So the Maroons trace their lineage back to the Ashanti people.
That's right.
The Ashanti is connected to the Akan tribe. According to the oral tradition, the Akan tribe stemmed from Judah. So as I began to look at this collectively and look at all the sources, I'm like, by golly, we are not Gentiles. We are descendants of the children of Israel. So once I was made aware of that, I began to teach that. And that's where some of my Christian brothers and sisters, I fell out of grace with them, and they start getting up, walking out of the church when I'm teaching. So I created a curriculum called Black History from the Bible. And I'm showing artifacts. I'm showing different relics I brought up the Lachish relief, and I showed the phenotypes of the people who were led into captivity, that they were Negroid based on phenotype. And I made the bold claim that we are the people of the book. Now, understand that we're the people of the book. We have a covenant agreement that we must adhere to the law, statutes, and commandments given to us by our Creator. That's where things became problematic. So I left the Christian church and I was fellowshipping with the local church, but being new to this experience, I needed some help because I knew there was something deeper, but I really couldn't excavate it. And I tried fellowshipping with some of our Sephardic brothers. I went to a Sephardic synagogue, but the connection just wasn't there. I'm just going to keep it real. The connection was not there. Culturally, it was not there. So I'm like, okay, where can I find an assembly or back then, a church where it's our people worshiping the way that we worship, yet still being Torah observant and, believing that, Yeshua is the Mashiach, that he is the promised Messiah. So I found a small church that had just denounced Christianity. They went from Sunday worship to Shabbat worship. And they were looking to me to help teach. And I'm like, okay, I don't have nothing. So scrolling through YouTube, looking for material, I came across a video where Ron Dalton and Dr. Howard were talking about Gentiles.
Shout out
And
to
hearing
Ron Dalton.
Dr. Howard speak, I'm like, oh man, this cat is an intellectual, this is what I need. So Moreh, I looked him up on Facebook and I burnt his inbox up. And he would respond every now and then and say, okay, go to my website. And I would pull information from his website, bring it back to the congregation, and we would share. I had an opportunity to talk with him, and he reached out and said, okay, we love to help you all. Where are you? I said, I'm in the Orlando area. He said, well, actually we're about to start an assembly in the Orlando area and we don't have a Moreh there. Would you be interested? Because then I told him about my background, that I have extensive experience when it comes to ministry and leadership. I went up, met him and his wife, and I was floored to see the level of humility, commitment, love, and dedication that they both exerted to a group of Morehs, a group of teachers, was beyond anything that I've ever seen. Mory ZX, I came from an environment, and again, this is no secret. A lot of us know it. Some people just don't want to say it. But a lot of things that go on in the church, it's really about making money. I'm just going to be honest.
Right. That's right.
So if they're offering you a training class, you have to pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
The Moreh training, the first Moreh training, we didn't pay anything to learn from Dr. Howard and Moreh Tawana. They invested their own money in printing the material, getting the facility. All we had to do was just show up. I've never seen that before, because generally in the church, you got to take care of the pastor. I'm just going to be honest with you. You got to take care of the pastor. The pastor, he got a past appreciation. You got to do a special offering for his birthday. You got to do a special offering for his anniversary. But Dr. Howard and Moreh Tawana, they're doing all this and they're not asking for anything. That was new to me. I've never seen that level of leadership where they're pouring into people and not expecting anything back in return.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I met them.
All right. And if I could share something about the Great Awakening through Dr. Kenneth Howard and Moreh Tawana, his wife. My introduction to them began around late 2017. We began to correspond online, talk over the phone. And then finally, sometime around 2018, he reached out and said, I'd like you to take over some classes. I'd like you to teach Hebrew. So I began teaching Hebrew for the Great Awakening Assembly of Detroit online. And they enjoyed that so much that I was also asked to come back on after a couple semesters of teaching consistently there, to come back on again to teach Medu-Neter hieroglyphs. So we're now at about the year 2019, and to be exact, around September. And he says to me, we have a trip coming up to the Bahamas, and I would like you to be one of the key speakers. And I'm like, pinching myself because I never been on nobody cruise ship before. So so I can't believe that this is happening. And of course I acquiesced. I said, yeah. I think in the email I said, yeah, I think I can make it, knowing good and well I was gonna be there. Right. So shout out to Dr. Howard. Through the experiences of traveling with them to the Bahamas, doing missionary work there and speaking on the ground with people and literally carrying bags of food, truckloads of food, knocking on people doors and saying, hey, today is your day, this is yours, as we pulling up literally car after car with food and food and food. Now, as you know, as a Caribbean man, sufferation doesn't run just in Jamaica. It's all through the African diaspora. It's here in America and it's here in the Caribbean. But as we know, it's kind of different in the Caribbean, right? What we call it in the Caribbean a housing scheme. In America, they calling that the projects, right? So just so people are aware, we got our own projects in the Caribbean too. We just call it the housing scheme, right? And so a lot of times is, people are bunched up and living together. And even some of the conditions, what we look at as like poor conditions here in America, and you compare it to parts of Africa and parts of the Caribbean, you kind of look a little bit more rich because people back home in the Caribbean and in parts of Africa, they literally still live in an outhouse. You know that.
Yeah.
My parents didn't grow up with running water in the house. They went outside. They went and fetched water daily to brush their teeth with, to drink with, to bathe and shower with. You know that kind of liberty, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm saying that to say, when I went to Barbados, it was like, yo, everything that I've been seeing and, hearing about places like Trinidad, Guyana, Barbados, Jamaica, this thing is all over the Caribbean, right? So Dr. Howard now says, hey, I'm gonna have you speak in Detroit. We have a huge thing going on. Ron Dalton is introducing Hebrews to Negroes. This is when it was first impacting, right? And they said, I wanted you to be one of the keynote speakers again. So I went. Now, my background in the secular world is in the entertainment industry. I used to work with VP Records here in Queens. That's the Def Jam of the Caribbean. The biggest record label for hip hop artists in the 90s to the 2000s was to sign with Def Jam Records that Russell Simmons created, right? As you know, that's VP Records to the Caribbean, Jamaica, yes, right? Mm-hmm. So I used to work with VP Records in Queens through my sister, Tanya Lawson. Wyclef just made her the head of operations for several of the business ventures that he has throughout the Caribbean and namely in Jamaica. So shout out to her. So at that time, I'm already coming from a family background where my family has sound systems, right? Remember, this is how hip hop comes into material existence as well, through the sound system culture with Kool Herc in the Bronx, right? So my family, one of my father's cousin in the Bronx, he have a sound called Supertone. And, he has dub plates that he would cut. I can remember going all the way to Don Juan's studio in Brooklyn, New York, to have dub plates cut either for family members or have dub plates cut for friends that I knew that didn't have the links and the connection to the dub plate man. So I remember seeing a Sanchez in Brooklyn, New York in the 90s and Flowagan and, all these big artists, Shaba, Ninja, Buju, all of them used to come through Don Juan's studio in Brooklyn, New York off of Bedford, right? So that's my background. Now, forward now, I'm in the Great Awakening in Detroit. And I'm not thinking of reggae right now. I'm just thinking of there's Ron Dalton from Hebrews to Negroes. There's Divine Prospect. Divine, I'm not starstruck with you because I know you from New York, whatever. That's how we both looking at each other. Shout out to Divine. But guess who I run into? Bay C, the heavy bass voice of TOK. He was at the Great Awakening Hebrew Conference in Detroit for Ron Dalton's movie release. Remember, TOK got big hits all over the radio, right? Big hits. So I see Bay C, and I'm like, he looks at me and he says, "Oh my God, that's Zion Lex." I said, "Oh my God, that's Bay C from TOK." So he's there with his mother, he's there with his father. We connect, we exchange numbers. I signed autographs. I had copies of my book. I signed autographs, gave them to his family right there in Detroit. Forward now, we come back to New York, and I give him a call and I say, "Hey, now that we friends, I'm gonna need some dub plates for my sound system because I have my own sound, right?" So he sent me some dub plates. I went all the way to Queens, New York, gave his mom the money, and we cut some dub plates. And since then to this day, I've added many of his jingles and tunes to my sound system. So I'm bringing us there for a reason now, because all of this for me had great impact in terms of internalizing the reach of the Great Awakening. A lot of people don't know the Great Awakening assembly is a very vast assembly. Can you give us more insight about the different districts, cities, states, and maybe even countries in the outside the US that the Great Awakening has spread to, as far as you're aware of?
Absolutely. So, in terms of our footprint, we have several assemblies within the United States, and then we have what are called worship hubs, where if we don't have an assembly in the city, we have a liaison, someone who is a representative, and they'll gather people at a location or at their home, and then they will participate in worship. So we have assemblies, we have worship hubs. We are, of course, you mentioned the Bahamas. We have an assembly in the Bahamas. We have an assembly. We have worship hub in the UK. We have an assembly in Zambia. We have an assembly in Kenya. We're working on developing an assembly in Nigeria. We're working on assembly in the Philippines. Countries are reaching out. We're working on developing an assembly in Jamaica. But in terms of our reach, we are working to ensure that we develop a community mindset for our people throughout the United States, throughout the Caribbean islands, on the continent, as well as different countries within Europe. So we have quite a few affiliates, and we work cohesively. One of the things that some people may not be aware of when it comes to Great Awakening assemblies, we have a level of autonomy where it's not this heavy structure where some camps or some communities have this strict adherence. We allow different assemblies to develop their own culture, which is
I can
something
respect
quite
that.
unique.
That's unique. That's unique because mostly the mother hub of an organization would wish that all of her branches, all of her stems share all of the core tenets, and to the extent that they don't want them to deviate at all. And so, it speaks again to the measure and character of Dr. Tarana Howard and Dr. Kenneth Howard, because having met them in person, they knew at that time I was a non-messianic Israelite. I had not at that time accepted Yeshua as Hamashiach, as the Savior, and they still allowed me to come join their assembly and even teach among them. So, shout out to them. And I want to ask you about your unique assembly. Tell us about the Great Awakening of Orlando that you head.
Praise, yeah. So for the Orlando Assembly, I lead alongside Moreh Oladeli. He's from Guyana. Moreh Eric Vanaki, and Ema Moreh Donna Robinson. We've been together for over 3.5 years. July of this Gregorian year will be 4 years since we've been serving in Orlando. We are heavily invested in the community. We have done various outreach where we go out into the community. We bring food, we share pamphlets in terms of helping people understand who they are as quote unquote African Americans, who they are as Hebrews. We help people in the community whenever they reach out to us. We give. We give. We give. We get calls of people who need assistance in different areas. and we ensure that we appeal. And one thing about the Mishpachah in Orlando, they're very, very charitable, meaning they give. If there's a need and someone reach out to us, we give. We meet twice a month in person, and then we meet on Zoom. The type of assembly that we operate in, we try our best to move away from dogma. So you mentioned something earlier that it's not common for for an organization or an organism to allow a level of autonomy where people sometimes can demonstrate their individuality. With Great Awakening in Orlando, we focus heavily in some areas. We want people to be able to come and not feel as if they're being pressured. So one of the things that we do with our disclaimer, we tell people, and for some communities, they frown on this, but Mory ZX, I spent almost 2 years in Toastmasters. And for those of you who may not know, it's a leadership and communication development program. And one thing I learned about communication, that if you are not speaking the same language as your audience, you're not able to effectively reach them.
That's right.
So we create a culture in Orlando where we still use words and phrases that people may understand, because we're somewhat of a bridge. As people are coming into the awakening, we have created an environment where the bridge. So we still use words like Lord, God, Jesus, and Christ, just for relatability, so
That's
people
right.
can understand
That's right.
what we are attempting to do, which is to help them get closer to the Creator. And as a part of our mission, we want to create an environment where we can empower people through 3 E's: education, economics, and entrepreneurship. I firmly believe that for our community, we need to spend some time in the area of education. And I'm not necessarily talking about the institutionalized education. We can teach our own people the skills necessary to become entrepreneurs. I believe that if our community have enough entrepreneurs, we can impact our community economically. So we focus on education, entrepreneurship, and economics. Those are the 3 things that the Orlando Assembly we're working towards. And I believe that we can help people grow, become independent. Again, my background in Jamaica is that I grew up seeing my grandparents working for themselves. So I respect those who have a call, and I don't want to deviate too much, Moreh, but when it comes to your purpose and understanding what you're here to do, that is a game changer. So
Yes.
when you have come into that place where you realize that if you're called to serve in corporate America, that may be your calling. As we look through the text, Nehemiah, he served as a cupbearer to the king. So he served, quote unquote, in a capitalistic system or in a corporate system. Others are called to be entrepreneurs, and those are the people that we want to help through educating them on how to start a business, what are some of the things needed to effectively run your business, and how to become an effective leader. Hopefully that answers your question, Moreh.
That certainly answers my question. And my other inquiries so far is to ask you about um, your doctrinal view of the um, oral tradition. Um, I'm going to set it up a little bit, doing a little research on you and having, dialogue with you over the years behind the scenes. I have seen and noticed that you have began to lean more upon the idea and conception and reality of there being an oral tradition. Can you talk to us about that as a messianic observant Israelite? Because in my experience, the oral tradition has been easier for the Old Testament community to accept because modern Jewry, who themselves would represent a Torah only viewpoint, also accept the oral tradition. So in the Old Testament community, I've always grew up with elders that taught from the pages and the annals of the oral tradition, right? However, when I first began to encounter Messianic Israelites coming into the 2000s, I found that 99% of them rejected it. So my question then is, as a Messianic leader, teacher in the greater community, what led to your acceptance of the oral tradition, and perhaps what teachings inspired that perception?
So my first introduction to the oral traditions was very negative. As you may already know, that some within our community, they speak negatively against, for example, the Talmud. Some have even called it the devil's book. Some believe that it's of European origin. And when I say European Jewry who have concocted this manuscript, this text, this body of work that does not accurately represent what our ancestors observed. And at first, I'm like, okay, I can go along with that because I was in a learning space. What really got me intrigued when it comes to the oral traditions is the fact that many assert that Paul, Rav Shaul, for those who are in that level of study, that he was the antagonist when it comes to Messianic believers. And then we see Paul making a transition. But Paul's made some comments that really stood out to me. So I first started with studying the life of Paul, because within the quote unquote awakening or the Israelite community, Paul is a controversial figure to a lot of people, or for a lot of people.
Yes.
Some believe that he is anti-Torah when you read his letters to the Gentiles or to Gentile assembly or to mixed assembly, because they assert that he's teaching that the works of the law is not relevant once you accept Yahusha as the Messiah, or Yeshua as the Messiah. So I took a closer look at Paul, and I see Paul defending himself in the book of Acts, or the letter Acts, or the manuscript of Acts. He says something very interesting. He says, neither against the traditions of our father or against Caesar have offended in no way. So I kept seeing this word tradition come up. And I'm like, okay, this, I'm like, well, why is this thing tradition? He write to one assembly, says, encourage them to walk in the tradition that he taught them. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Let's push pause here. Is either you're teaching Torah or you're teaching tradition? Because for a lot of our Messianic brothers and sisters, the word tradition is offensive, because we read in the account of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John where Yeshua, he's criticizing the traditions, or allegedly, to some who may not be aware of the extent of his conversation. And for them, this, that's the traditions of man. But I'm like, Paul, being a well-studied Pharisee who now accepts Yeshua as the Mashiach, why is he telling this assembly that they should follow the tradition that he's teaching them? So that's what got me on the path to do a deep dive. What are these traditions? And that's what opened the door to the oral traditions. I didn't know there were 7 different types of Pharisees. I didn't know about minhagim. I didn't know about takana. I didn't know about geshera in terms of how law or how customs or how traditions were interpreted in the Second Temple period and in first century Judea. So as I began to look at the state of the awakening and how fractured we are when it comes to ideology, bias, dogma, I went back to my first inquiry from Christianity and said, okay, if we're all saying something different, we can't all be right. So what is the foundational principle that Mashiach himself followed, his apostles followed, and those after him. What did they follow? What did they teach? And that's when I was exposed to the men of the Great Assembly. That's when I was exposed to the reconstruction that Nehemiah led, and the elders who were established to help deal with doctrine, to help put together principles, community guidelines on how Israelites were supposed to live. Because right now, a lot of us are at different junctures when it comes to halakha. But what did our elders follow? What did the apostles follow? Since we have received this message about Yeshua from the apostles, what type of lifestyle did they live? How did they govern themselves? Why is Daniel praying 3 times a day? I don't see that in Torah. We see the same thing occurring in the so-called New Testament, where the disciples are praying 3 times a day. They're going up to the temple to pray. I'll throw some more out there at you all. Why is the prayer that Mashiach taught his disciples a summary of what we see in the Mishnah in terms of what is it? Is it the Haggadah? I don't remember if that's what it is called, but he breaks down this prayer, and I'm like, okay, there's some things going on here that the dots need to be connected from we leave Malachi and we transition over into Matthew.
That's
There's
right.
some things going on here that I need an explanation for, and I found those explanations by reading the Mishnah, by reading the oral traditions.
That's right. Yeshua's prayer in the New Testament is, as Hadara says, it's a summary of the Amidah. Right?
Yeah.
The standing prayer. So yes, spot on. Because my next question I was going to ask you on this topic is, what are, if any, the proof texts in the Bible that offers validation for the belief in the oral tradition, right? If I could ask you just one last question on this point, and then we'll move on. Again, as an Old Testament only Israelite formerly, I've noticed that it was easier for the community of Old Testament Israelites to accept the existence of an oral tradition and its validation. And I didn't find that in the New Testament or Messianic community. So I asked you last question on this topic. What are 2 of the strongest or probably more viable proof texts in the New Testament for the validity of there being oral traditions that Yeshua himself has respect for?
One I would say is the fact that he beckons his audience, he encourages his audience to listen to the Perishim. Now, when you understand the dynamic between the Pharisees and the Sadducees did not believe in the oral tradition.
That's a fact.
But the Pharisees, on the other hand, accepted both the oral tradition and the written Torah.
That's right.
So Mashiach is saying he's agreeing more with the Pharisees than he's with the Sadducees. And he tells his audience to listen, follow the teachings of the Pharisees. So if you're telling me to follow the teaching of the Pharisees, and the Pharisees are teaching and believing in both the written Torah and the oral Torah, that is a bit problematic if I'm going to reject the oral Torah in its entirety.
Excellent answer. Excellent answer. I'm going to come back to doctrines in a moment, but I want to segue into what I want to call the second half of this interview, and then bring it towards a slow wrap. So apart from being a man that wears many hats, right? Father, husband, a Moreh in the Israelite community, you're also a CEO. I want you to tell us about your company. I want you to tell us about the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into forming a company, because often when a person of your stature is interviewed about having a business and what that business is, we're just talking about all of the positive and great things that come from it, forgetting to really highlight for people the level of blood, sweat, and tears, the level of everybody around you saying, give up, the level of everybody around you saying, I don't see it. Tell us about your company, but more importantly, tell us about the real life struggles behind the company.
Yep. So in terms of my company, Caribbean Kitchen Foods, we started, me and my mom, before she passed, started on a journey based on our love for food. So first and foremost, this is where our heart is. If you cut us, this is what you're going to see. My mom, and for those who know the event in Jamaica called Demby, it's in Clarendon. Actually, Demby is a place, but it's an agricultural festival. And my mom would wake up early in the morning to go out to set up her jerk pan, to cook jerk chicken, fry festival, and cook soup.
I'm going to pause you right there, because on that note, with such a beautiful delivery, I'd be crazy not to give the people a visual. Here we go.
Caribbean Kitchen Foods offers 7 unique blends of premium, low-sodium Jamaican seasoning that will add a burst of flavor to your dishes. Our authentic, all-natural Jamaican seasonings are a game changer when it comes to adding a burst of flavor to your dishes. Our products are kosher, all-natural, contains ingredients that are gluten-free and GMO-free. Our seasonings are handcrafted with the highest quality ingredients. We source our ingredients from the Caribbean to capture the authentic taste of the islands. Unleash your creativity in the kitchen and savor the taste of the Caribbean with our spice blends.
All right. So do continue.
Yes. So I grew up seeing my mom cook, and before doing food reviews were popular, before it became a thing on YouTube, we used to travel around the island. So a little bit of history of Morehs Islands. Similar to your love for Jamaican music, I absolutely love Jamaican music because my mom, she was the manager of a record store. And for those of you who know this, it's not in existence before, but it's at Green Shop in Meapen. She was the manager of the record store. So we used to travel around the island. We used to go back and forth to Kingston to get the new release of the record. And, I met a few people. I remember the first time I saw Buju Banton, I was starstruck. Because I ran into him at the studio when we went to pick up records. So the new release record, we would get the record, bring it back to Meapen and would sell it. But throughout our travels, we would taste different cooking, different foods. And we were food critics. And I would measure everybody else's food against my mom's food because my mom had a unique skill of combining seasoning. She would go to the market and she would buy like a whole heap of different seasoning, dry and fresh, and she would blend it up for her jerk, her jerk seasoning. It was unique. Yeah, I remember this just like it was yesterday, although it was some 30-something years ago. And people would come back to her. She would sell out. People would come back to her and say, I love your jerk chicken. So because of our love for food, we knew our calling was in that area. But me attending school, there were some challenges. One, the cost to really open a restaurant in the United States, it's astronomical. So we began to brainstorm and we're like, okay, let's do a food truck. At the advent of looking at a food truck, we're like, okay, let's do some cost analysis for ingredients. We realized that to source seasoning from Jamaica was very expensive. The seasoning being sold in the United States were not a true representation of authentic Jamaican seasoning.
That's a fact.
So that's when we're like, okay, let's take our knowledge of authentic Jamaican seasoning and try to replicate it over here. So we created a formulation of a few seasoning, and we sent it to a company to blend it up for us, and they sent back the finished product. And it took a little while for us to really get the blend that we were happy with. Unfortunately, before we were able to launch and go to market, my mom passed. So a lot of what I'm doing, it's to really honor her legacy. Thank you. It's to honor her legacy. So in terms of some of the challenges, that it takes to start a business and run a business. First, you have to know what kind of business entity you're starting. You can have a not-for-profit, you can have a LLC, limited liability, you can have a sole proprietorship, you can have an S corporation or a C corporation. So in college, I studied business. My major was business. I have an undergraduate in business administration, and I have a master's in organizational leadership. So one of my projects in my undergraduate program is to come up with a concept, a business concept. So, I'm like, okay, this is a no-brainer. It's centered around what I love, which is food and cooking. So I created this mock business concept, pitched it to my professor. He said, this is absolutely brilliant. What was brilliant about it? Because I noticed that there was a gap in the delivery of Jamaican food in the US that I wanted to fill. That was exacerbated by COVID, where most of the restaurants, they could only allow a certain amount of people to go in, and then there were curfews where restaurants were closing early, or sometimes restaurants weren't open at all. Some restaurants went out of business. So I'm like, okay, how do we really take advantage of adversity? Moreh ZX, I'm a firm believer that whenever there's adversity, it brings forth opportunity.
That's right.
So I'm like, okay, what is an opportunity here? So that's when I decided to look at the e-commerce model to deliver Jamaican food to people. Specifically, not just food, but create a frozen dinner with rice and peas, cabbage, jerk chicken, curry goat, brown stew beef. Because I'm like, if people can't go to the restaurant, let's bring the restaurant to the people. So some of the challenges was, one, deciding what entity to go with. Again, are we going to go with LLC? Because I wanted investors, or wanted a business structure to appeal to investors, I went with an S corp. When you're thinking about starting a business, how much do you want to scale this business? I mean, is this business just something you want to do and, it's just you? And again, everyone, they have to do what they're called to do. If you have a lawn business, if you have a dry cleaning business, if you have a tree cutting business, or car wash business, how much do you want to scale this? Do you want this to be a global brand, or do you just want this to be local? So because I'm thinking global, I went with the S corp. With some of those moves came challenges in terms of getting capital. So that one, well, the biggest challenge, Mory ZX, is getting capital. And you hear all this fluff. Oh, you can get a grant or you can get a loan. It's not that easy. First of all, to get a grant, you just don't write a grant application and they're like, oh, thank you for sending in your application. Here is the money. No, does not work like that. There are several rounds. One, they have to look at your grant application compared to others. And something that people don't know, we may have to do a part 2 on this because I love talking business. Some of the grants are more geared towards like after-school programs, minority-based programs, programs to help people who are in need, feeding the hungry, or some environmental, you're trying to solve some environmental problem. Yes, there are grants for small business, for startup, for minority, but you have to compete. You have to know the language to write, and you may not be selected as a candidate to be awarded that grant. So that's something that people need to be aware of. But getting capital, so I had to I had to pretty much bet on myself. During COVID time period, the IRS had made some accommodations where you can get some of your retirement funds to use because of COVID-19. So I used some of my retirement funds to start the business, because people say you can, just go and get a loan. If you don't have any type of revenue from your business, the bank more than likely will not give you a loan. You need to show that, one, you've been in business a while, and for us just starting out, we didn't have that track record. So it took us a while to develop that. But first starting out, you have to have capital to get started. Don't know how much more you want me to get in, but I mean, this area I can really go in because it's something that I'm living.
Listen. I'm appreciative. I'm sure that people are greatly appreciative because what I've come to appreciate as someone who has been involved in business ventures on a much smaller scale than that of yours, but still nonetheless involved in business ventures, is that when we arrive at where we want to arrive and we start to, get the success we're looking at, as we convey these stories to the people, we forget to include the journey. The journey is important rather than always focusing on the arrival and destination, because most people get turned off by the journey. Most people have ideas in our community. You said earlier that you fully understand that it takes economics to grow this community. And so Black people are coming into that understanding and they're going in the entrepreneurship route and in that direction. However, as soon as they begin to encounter serious trials, struggles, and maybe even setbacks, they give up. And you can't give up. And your story is a story that few can share, because you are one of few that refuse to take a no for an answer, that refuse to give up. I'm sure to get your products into various businesses, you even had to knock on doors, send some emails, make some phone calls, pop out, as they say, pull up, as they say, right? So that's important. Now, I want to share a personal story with you. My mom used to send me to the store years ago. Go get this seasoning and go get that seasoning. And I used to come back, it's the wrong seasoning. And oh, that's not the seasoning I use. And I'm like, why does seasoning matter? And mommy's like, listen, you got a lot to learn. When it comes to Caribbean dishes, right? Yes, most of the seasonings are alike. And if you really know how to cook, you're going to manage, right? But then we all know that to make Caribbean dishes, it don't really matter what type of seasoning you have, because the way that you prepare that dish is really going to say how that dish is going to turn out. So I've watched my mom take seasonings that weren't really good and make a hell of a meal with it, right? However, you sent me a bundle of your seasonings. And I said, I'm not going to put the love in it that I normally do when I cook this type of food, because I want to know what your seasoning do. And brother, when I tell you the seasonings that you have already taste like the love that Caribbean people put into the food. I mean, let me just explain. You know this, but there might be some people in the audience, right? We know that chicken don't prepare the same day. You season it, you wash it, you clean it, right? Season it heavy, and it go in the fridge, what? Overnight. Slice it a bit, let it marinate, take it out the next day, then it's ready to cook and serve, right? So I said, when I got your seasonings, I'm not doing none of that, because I just want to know what your seasonings do. So I'm not going to give it the love that I grew up learning to give food and its preparation. I just want to know how great or how good your seasoning. I really did this. And I said to my wife, I said, come try this. Come and try this. She tasted, she said, you had that soaked overnight. I said, no, I didn't. I just started making it an hour and a half ago. She said, no, that's soaked. I said, that was an hour and a half of cooking, no preparation. She said, I know how your mom cook. I know how your dad cook. In order to get food a certain way, you gotta season it overnight. I said, listen, not with these seasonings. So shout out to you, my brother. You really have a gold mine over here. And what I noticed is even on your website, you took a level and measure of care to not only say I have the seasonings that you guys need, but you even came and said, check this, I'm gonna actually show you how to prepare the meal. So I want to ask you about that for a moment, right? What inspired you to go the extra distance? Because you didn't have to do this. So talk to us about this real quick.
I'm the type of person that look at things from end to end. And when we created our blend, thank you so much for your warm regards. We really didn't know the impact it was going to have. First and foremost, our products are a premium product. And I say that with a level of conviction without even wavering or batting an eye. It took me a while to get there because you can love your product, but that don't mean other people are going to love it. So we believed in it and we loved it. And we're like, okay, let's put it out there and see how other people feel about it. And when we began to get the reviews and people love the products, we're like, wow, this is amazing, but really didn't make the connection until we got ready to place our second order. And I thought that the key was to compete based on price. So I said to, the person I'm working with, I said, what can we do to get the cost down? Because you mentioned knocking on doors and going to certain places. I went to certain places, Mory ZX, and they're like, your product is a little bit too expensive. We're not able to scale this. We would not make enough profit margin because all the products within your category is selling for X price. I didn't realize that, and again, I'm not embellishing here. All y'all have to do is just try the seasoning. I didn't realize I'm taking a Bentley to a Corolla car lot and I'm trying to sell a Bentley to a Corolla dealership. It's not a fit. It's not a good fit. Two different classes. Our product is the Bentley of seasonings. It's a premium product. So when we went back to the manufacturer, he says, if we remove this, that, and that, because these are what driving your cost up. I'm like, okay, why is it driving my cost up? He said, because you're the only one using this of all the companies that we manufacture seasoning for. So we have to order this specially for you. No one else is using these ingredients. No one else is putting smoked flavor in their mild jerk seasoning.
Stop there for a second because I got to explain that for people that might not know. To get jerk chicken to reach that authentic level of back home, how it tastes, right? You might not have Red Stripe near your local supermarkets in certain places, but as you know, back home, you might see somebody take some Red Stripe and run it through the grill on the chicken to make sure that that chicken have a level of flavor and kick to it as well. But the point is, when Jamaicans specifically, out of all people in the Caribbean, when they go to make jerk chicken, what they do is they make sure that it's cooked on the grill. Can jerk chicken be made in the oven on your stove? Of course it can, right? But jerk chicken on the grill come with that smoke. So I'm not sure if everybody caught it. He literally just said the seasonings that he designed captures that smoke grill flavor. Rewind and come again for them. Please make sure that they understand that well.
Absolutely. So our mild jerk seasoning has liquid smoke flavor built in. It's in a powder form, and we could not remove that to get the price down because then it would compromise the integrity of our product. So now we are repositioning ourselves to come back to the market with a brand story that matches really what we have as a premium product. To really test our product out, what I would challenge everyone to do, once you place your order, is to set the seasoning in like a small bowl, add a little bit of water to it, and walk away for an hour and come back, and you'll see the bold flavors hydrate. Water will hydrate the raw the natural seasonings, and you'll see the ginger, you'll see the scallion, you'll see the thyme, you'll see the garlic. So when we notice that, okay, our product is really different from everything else out there in the market, because the manufacturer is saying we're ordering stuff specifically for your brand, and this is why it's more expensive. Because when you understand business, it's a volume game. The more you order, or the more they can order and use in other people's product, the less your costs will be. But if they're ordering it exclusively for you, it's been sourced from Jamaica, they're ordering it just for you, they're gonna have to charge you more. So we noticed that. But more importantly, to answer your question, Mory ZX, why did we put together a recipe? It's because of our audience.
All right, I want to stop you for one moment just before you go any further because I want to read a comment and I want to make a statement. Princess Adara says, I love to cook, so I had to place my order just now. Y'all got me hyped. LOL. I can't wait to get them. So I want to say to everybody as I go to a new share screen, and when you guys can see the screen, I'm gonna say something to you. We have a very special lecture happening tonight at Learn Torah Hebrew Academy on Patreon. And in order to watch the lecture, you have to be at least a gold tier member or higher in order to view it. However, for today and today only, if the first 5 people that email me can confirm that they just went to caribfoods.com, I'm putting the link in the chat right now. If you can confirm to me via email, send me the receipt that shows, send the receipt to zionlex@gmail.com. Some of the products are as low as $8.99. I don't care what you spent. If you can spend more and buy a bundle, that's even greater. But to the first 5 people that can show me a receipt that they purchased something from this website right now on the live stream, I'll give you free access to this lecture, and I'll give you free access to our Torah and Hebrew classes for the remaining 30 days. That's for the first 5 people. I need a confirmation via email that you went on the website and that you purchased. So make sure that you go and you do that. On that note, everybody, we're going to take a quick commercial break, reset, and we will be right back.
Caribbean kitchen food, where the spices stand. From jerky curry, give your dishes a chance. Oh, seasoning so vibrant, like a tropical breeze. Oh, for the finest flavors, it's a culinary tease. Oh, savor the sunshine in every single bite. Caribbean kitchen food, more flavors are just right. With every pinch and sprinkle, a journey will begin to the islands of delight. Oh, 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 oh.
All right. What I'm going to attempt to do is myself and Mory Vaughn will talk behind the scenes. I've been promoting his brand for quite some time now. You guys have been watching Caribbean Kitchen seasoning commercials on Zionlex TV for at least 2 years now. And now you finally get to meet the man behind the seasoning. And I want to say that we have to begin to support our own. We really have to begin to support our people. We are only as successful as our ability to raise the community. The smartest thing that a man or woman can do when they come into capital, money, and finance is empower the people around them. One thing is for sure, things go up and things go down. Today there's a high tide, tomorrow there's a low tide. But if once I get my finance and my capital, I take that and I ensure that I empower people around me, that is how I always remain at a level of success. So I say that to say, we as a community have to understand that our success cannot be our success alone. We have to contribute towards the success of others. So this is an honorable man before us, an honorable brother, and a hell of a teacher. And I'm asking everyone to support him as much as you can. You guys have never seen me do and say some of the things that I'm willing to say and do and endorse because of his integrity and his level of friendship and his level of character. I'm willing to do those things. I'm going to talk with him behind the scenes and try to see if we can negotiate a percentage discount, a discount code. It's like, let's say if you guys use the Zionlex TV discount code, we can get you a discount on these products. We'll reason behind the scenes and see if we can make that happen. But again, we want our community to support our brother. Please, everyone, the first 5 people that can confirm a receipt, send it to my email, zionlex@gmail.com. You have a 30-day pass to all of our classes, and you have a pass to tonight's lecture. But do continue, Mory Vaughn.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So in terms of the reason why we put the recipes together, it's because of our audience. One, some people have never used our seasoning before, and they need some guidance because it's different. It's a low sodium. And because of that, they don't know the right portion to use, because traditionally, some Jamaican seasoning or Caribbean seasoning, salt is very high. So for health reasons, we went with a low sodium because we want to impact our community in a positive way. Our community struggle with hypertension. A lot of people in our community struggle with hypertension, and we don't want to be a contributor to the issues that are impacting our community. We want to bring alleviation. So we reduce the sodium. So these are low sodium, but people are saying, okay, how much of it do I use? Do I go liberal? Is it no salt? Do I go light? So we did that for one part of our audience. The next part of our audience are people who have never cooked Jamaican food or Caribbean food. And you're like, okay, your seasonings look good. I would love to buy it, but how do I use it? So this is why we put the recipe together to help people along the way to understand how to use the seasoning and how to get the best flavors out of their dishes.
All right, all right. I mean, we covered a lot of ground. Thank you very much for telling us about Caribbean kitchens. Again, everyone, make sure you show your love. Make sure that you endorse. I want to move on now and kind of close this interview by asking you to touch on some of the things that you think is necessary to grow our community spiritually and intellectually, right? As a Moreh and as a teacher, what do you think is the void that is missing intellectually and spiritually in the Israelite community? And what do you think is necessary to fill said void?
So one of the biggest void that I see is the lack of collaboration. So just as you and I, we're collaborating, we're working together within the Israelite community, some of our brothers and sisters, they isolate themselves to only work with their group, their assembly, their community. If we're really going to embrace this idea of an Echad community, we all claim we're Israelites. We all claim that we follow Torah, at least. I know that some among us are non-messianic, but we follow the tenets of Torah. We are a communal people, not just with your group or my group, but we have to learn to work together. So collaboration, working together to achieve a common goal, whether it's to learn how to grow our own food, how to start our own business, how to develop our own schools, how to create opportunities for our own people. We have to think outside of our assembly. We have to think outside of our camp. We have to think outside of our community and interact with each other in a manner that brings growth. There's so much divisiveness within our community, Moreh ZX. I'm sure you probably come across it. We don't agree doctrinally, and instead of us being amicable and say, you know what, you hold the majority view, I hold the minority view, but you know, let's all get along. Let's look beyond that. No, we're quick to jump on YouTube to create a video tearing each other down. If you look on Facebook, the posts, it's toxic. Because I hold to a set of books that you don't hold to, even with language, the way I say the Most High's name, we're correcting each other on some of the minor things. So one of the things we have to move beyond is we have to stop majoring in the minors.
Say that again, sir.
We have to stop majoring in the minors. There's some small things that it's really not enough for us to be enemies, for us to be adversaries, for us to stop talking to each other because of small things. If we're really going to look at what it is required to be a community, we have to embrace diversity. We're all created differently. We all look differently. Some of us kind of look the same, but we speak differently. We're from different areas, and we cannot have this box mentality. We want people to fit into our box, and if you don't, then we ain't rocking with you.
That don't make
sense. We have to get outside of that mindset.
That's right. That's right.
Outside of that mindset. From a doctrinal standpoint, I would love for a community to put aside their dogma. When it comes to research, and I have a full presentation on this, Well, we have to be honest scholars, not just show the side of scholarship that support our position, but maybe show the other side that disagree with our position, and be willing and honest to say, you know what, based on the research that I have done, this is the conclusion that I have drawn. Scholarship is not infallible. So while we appreciate scholarship, we should be willing to say, you know what, I understand doctrinally that this is what you hold to. Moreh ZX, when we start interacting, I knew you were non-messianic, but I never came at you in a way that was, antagonistic, or calling you out, or putting you down. Because hey, at the end of the day, man, we're all the children of Israel.
That's a fact.
So if we can look beyond our doctrinal dogmas and be able to come together, work together, because without unity, we will never thrive. We
That's a
can never
fact.
thrive when it comes to building up our community if we're not willing to be united. And for us to be united, it takes a mindset of humility to say, let me put my preference away and work towards a common goal. And then that's my take on that, Moreh.
That's excellent, my brother. That's excellent. I mean, we have great chemistry and a good friendship over the years, and I can only pray that the Creator continue to strengthen us towards that end. For people who are interested in the Great Awakening of Orlando, is your membership limited to people that live in the state of Florida, or can people actually join and become a part of your ministry no matter where they are in the world? Talk to us about your community, your ministry, and how far you reach and how willing you are to accept those far beyond where you guys reside.
Absolutely. So in terms of the structure, we do not do membership in the traditional way. We allow people to come and fellowship with us. If they decide they want to move on after one or two fellowship, bless you, whatever works for you. If what we have going on in Orlando is not to your liking, we're not mad, but we encourage people to fellowship. And then we have a level called stewardship. So these are our leaders who work and they make a commitment that they will support Great Awakening in Orlando. So your Morehs, those who do devotional, those who serve in hospitality, they're stewards in the assembly, kingdom stewards. In terms of who want to come, our door is wide open. We are a bridge. So we get people who come from different backgrounds, different doctrinal backgrounds, different denominational backgrounds. Some come from different camps, different community, different assemblies. We have our Zoom that's open to anyone who wants to join in. Our YouTube channel is GAA-ORL. If you want to hop on and just see what we teach, what we're about, we encourage you to do so. We have a global approach where we understand the intersection of culture, that not everyone is from the U.S. Me, for example, I'm from Jamaica. More Oladelis from Guyana. We have a few of the Mishpika or from different states, and we have people who join us online from the continent, from the UK. So we have an open door. Our heart is really, really to serve and to help meet the needs of our people. And we demonstrate that by the love that we show people when they come in. And again, even when they leave, we have some people who've left and they've come back. We welcome them back just as if they didn't leave. We do not have a monopoly on what the scriptures teach. We do our best to be objective. We do our best to align ourselves with Torah. We do our best to be led by the Ruach. We do our best to help meet the needs of our community. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. We're growing, we're learning. And for those of you who may see some areas of opportunities for growth, we ask you to reach out to us and say, hey, I noticed that one court reached out to me more and said, I realized that y'all only said the first few words of the Shema. What about the rest? I said, you know what? Thank y'all so much. I'm going to get the rest of the words to the Shema. One person reached out and said, why don't y'all show the Ivrit? So okay, that's what. Let's do the 10 Commandments. We have it in the Ivrit, we have the transliteration, and then we have the English, because we're open to growth. We're open to feedback. I'll close with this, Morehs and Lex. One of the interesting thing about feedback is that some people view it in a negative light, and truly sometimes we need to just reconsider how we look at feedback. Can you imagine if Moshe had said to Jethro, said, man, you know, you play hating on me because, you know, I'm leading more people than you are. You're gonna tell me
you're old timer.
Delegate. Yeah, you know, you're on that old school stuff. But the interesting thing is that some within his community, Moses, were telling him, they were challenging him.
Yeah.
But when Jethro laid it out, then Moses went through a reformation. So he leveraged the feedback to make constructive changes to better the community. So with that, I close that we have to be open to feedback. We have to think about things objectively. We have to think about things from a growth mindset. And at the end of the day, above all, pursue purpose.
All right. Thank you, Moreh Vaughn Parker. Thank you for the honor of accepting my invite to come here and speak today and share with us your community initiative, your skill sets, and, you know, introduce your business to a different audience. We thank you, we value you, and we definitely hope to hear from you again. I will definitely be plugging the links to your business and even your YouTube live streams throughout the course of my live streams. That's just how me and you roll. On that note, my brother, thank you again. We're going to leave at this point, everybody. I'm going to ask that if you guys would like to attend tonight's class, 5 of you have the opportunity to email me right now with a receipt that shows that you just purchased from caribkfoods.com. I'm going to take the link. I'm going to put it there again, giving you guys an opportunity. Right? That's 5 of you. Right? Now, I'm asking that you guys buy as much as you can. But, you know, I'm only expecting that you will buy what you can. On that note, thank you all. All praise to the Most High. This was a great link up, and I definitely look forward to connecting with you more, my good brother. Take care, all right?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, shalom. All right, to everyone else, peace and shalom. We're going to close with a word from our sponsors.
Caribbean Kitchen Foods offers 7 unique blends of premium, low-sodium Jamaican seasoning that will add a burst of flavor to your dishes. Our authentic, all-natural Jamaican seasonings are a game changer when it comes to adding a burst of flavor to your dishes. Our products are kosher, all-natural, contains ingredients that are gluten-free and GMO-free. Our seasonings are handcrafted with the highest quality ingredients. We source our ingredients from the Caribbean to capture the authentic taste of the islands. Unleash your creativity in the kitchen and savor the taste of the Caribbean with our spice blends.
Caribbean kitchen food, where the spices dance. From jerky curry, give your dishes a chance. Oh, seasoning so vibrant, like a tropical breeze. Oh, for the finest flavors, it's a culinary tease. Oh, stay with the sunshine in every single bite. Caribbean kitchen food, more flavors are just right. With every pinch and sprinkle, a journey will begin to the islands